All right, and let me get the chat back up just so I'm seeing where we're at. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining in this evening. Uh, just a reminder, if you can keep your mics muted, and we'll have time for question and answer at the end, as we have with the rest of the webinars in our series. If you're new to the series, helping Nevada students take ownership of their digital lives. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Leanne Morris. I am the Instructional Technology Coordinator for Carson City School District. I am very honored to be a digital engineer with the Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative, which is what this Digital Citizenship webinar series is a part of. So once again, thank you for joining in. As you can see from our schedule on the screen right now, this is the last webinar of the series. If you were able to join in, or if you have looked at the recording for the January webinar where security and privacy was one of the 9 elements, there is so much information and a lot of timely things that are happening right now currently for current events around student data privacy and cybersecurity. I wanted to do a little deeper dive into this element, and so that is what we are going to be learning more about tonight. So we'll just jump right in. So what is student data privacy? There are some different definitions, if you will, that are out there, but it's really using, collecting, handling, and governing students' personally identifiable information, usually referred to as PII. And the other part of that that's really important is, how is that information, how can it be used to identify, locate, or contact individual students based on information that may be accessible in any kind of a digital resource. So why is this? There we go. Why should classroom teachers care about student data privacy, and why is this important? Well, there are actually legal and ethical restrictions that impact what districts, schools, and teachers could and should be doing. With all of our digital learning that has happened even before the pandemic, the alphabet soup, as I would call it here in the parentheses on the screen, SIS is for Student Information Systems, LMS is for Learning Management Systems, and SSO is for Single Sign-On. Those are the different systems that we use in our schools to transfer information for student logins. And so, anything that is using these systems, we have to be very careful about where that information is going. I also have on the slide here, and I'm not going to click on this particular link, but if you have a Google account, you can log into this. There is a great privacy training. It's between 45 minutes and an hour on common sense education, which is one of the resources that I've talked a lot about in our webinar series, that will take you through some guided information specifically about student data privacy. And I would highly recommend going through that if you have time, just to build, more knowledge around this area. It's also important for not just classroom teachers, but administrators, if we have any administrators or other school personnel, community members, families as well, to be aware of national, federal laws. FERPA we'll talk about in just a minute, as it's mentioned here, but also some of our local Nevada state laws, and then district and school policies, acceptable use policies, social media policies. I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. And then, of course, with this whole webinar series of being about digital citizenship, how can we help everybody better understand this to be great digital citizens? So I mentioned earlier, just on the last slide, about FERPA. These FERPA and COPPA are 2 fundamental federal data privacy laws. And so it's really important that teachers are at least aware of what these privacy laws are. FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, one, it gives families the right to access their students' education records, and they can go to the school and request that. but in the world of digital resources, it helps protect the mishandling of student information that could be considered harmful, as I mentioned before, about being able to contact or, be able to find students by information that has been released. In addition to that, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or better known as COPPA, prohibits unfair or deceptive practices in connection with collecting, using information for children under the age of 13. And so all of those disclosure agreements that when new resources are, accepted, that this is really something to keep in mind, especially with our younger students. Almost every student at our elementary level, of course, is younger than 13. And I know here in Carson City School District, this rule applies for elementary and middle school students. It's only high school students that, that are above that age. So we know that all students at the high school level are above the age of 13. So those are two fundamental laws. And then we're going to look at two other laws that have to do with student data privacy as well. The Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, and I've just bolded the highlights of this particular law regarding surveys that ask questions of personal nature. Schools get contacted all the time. Could you give this survey out to your students? So our schools and the districts need to be really aware of, what information is being collected by those surveys. So that's what that law is referencing. And then another one, you may hear of CIPA and COPPA together, CIPA being the Children's Internet Protection Act. This is where filtering and monitoring of the resources that we're able to use. There are certain requirements. It's not only in schools, but it's also for libraries. Public libraries also have to they have to abide by these rules as well. And up to now, and it may be changing, it may not be, but it has always been tied to the funding of the E-rate program. In order to qualify for that federal funding, the schools and the libraries have to have this in place, the filtering and the monitoring. So those are 4 federal laws that are important for teachers to be aware of. Certainly, I am not a lawyer to know all the ins and outs of these, but even if you're familiar with the acronyms, that is a great place to start. And even in the national news, this was in July last summer. It's less than a year old, about reminding school districts to refresh their staff on what are those FERPA essentials, keeping track of what we're using and what we're allowing our students to use, so that we we're not giving out information that we don't want. And specifically, this came out, of course, with everything with the pandemic. And the link to this article is right here, this hyperlink. So please feel free to read that if you would like more information on that. In addition to the federal laws that I just talked about, there are actually 3 Nevada state student privacy laws. As you can see by the dates here, in the 2015 legislative session, these 2 laws were passed, SB 463 and AB 221, in regards to information. This one particular, SB 463, electronic applications used for educational purposes, they must provide written disclosures concerning what that PII, the personally identifiable information, what are they collecting. So our legislators, clear back in 2015, were very aware of, we don't want information being collected that is that could harm our students in any way. And then in addition, in 2015, with this AB 221, making various changes concerning policies in regard to what the Nevada Department of Education is doing with the information, because we all have the same student information system here in Nevada, Infinite Campus. And so just making sure that the State Department is also, making sure that that information is very safe. And then in 2019, SB 403 was passed, and requiring each, and this also includes private schools, as mentioned here, that information about any kind of technology, and I know in our district, our acceptable use policy is that document providing, sharing what the students will be using. So if you're not familiar with what you have specifically in your district, I would highly recommend that, that you take a look at that. So those are 3 Nevada laws that have to do with student privacy. So then we'll just take a little deeper dive into what constitutes student data. With the personally identifiable information, as I've said several times already in this presentation, what could that include? And this is very interesting, I think, based on, it's not just contact information, name, address, birth date, possibly social security numbers. I don't believe that is collected, but it's also digital files. What are students collecting as far as, things that possibly could be in a portfolio? So where is that information being shared out? It's certainly that we want to be collecting artifacts of work from our students and to show that progress of learning, but just making sure that they are in a secure location. And we'll talk about what some of those possibilities are, or what may not be allowed. So back to the AB 221 that I mentioned earlier about the Nevada Department of Education, specifically in the student data privacy, keeping in mind that, it's required that, the department knows that they take it very seriously to secure that information, the data that is collected, used, shared, and stored. So they have that disclaimer, and this actually takes, this link will take you right to the Nevada Department of Education website, where I took this quote from. The one thing that I did want to mention, and I actually took a few notes here so I would make sure I was speaking correctly on these. These are some great resources that you will find if you click on this link here about what is this data dictionary? Well, basically, it's all the data elements collected by the Nevada Department of Ed. It's not actually the data itself, it's just all of the elements that are collected from each school district. The second one here, this information security and privacy policy, actually covers things like staff training and data use, security breaches, and requirements for data sharing agreements. And so there's lots of great resources on this website from the Nevada Department of Ed to help our schools and our districts be better aware of this. And then the last one, the state level student data collection and protection, basically is, where is this information stored? How is it safeguarded? Who has access to the data? And helping, once again, the schools and the districts better understand where that information could and should be, to make sure that it is as safe as possible. So we have a lot of wonderful resources here within the state. So what if I get this question asked quite a bit here in Carson City School District and as part of the Digital Learning Collaborative. What if I want to use an education app or tool and I don't know if it's been vetted or if it is a good resource as far as data privacy? Well, first of all, it's really important to be familiar with your own school's policy or process. Most districts have some kind of a vetting process in place. So contact your IT department probably is the first place to start, and then they would be able to direct you, or your CNI curriculum and instruction. And if there isn't one that exists, it might be something that, certainly should and could be looked at. There are some privacy evaluation tools out there that can be used. The first one, and I'm going to actually come back to this in just a second because I want to dig into this. But before I talk about that one, there is one all common sense resources are free, but there is a paid resource, and this happens to be one that we use here in Carson City School District. It's called Ed Privacy from Education Framework, and our teachers here in Carson City know that this is the vetting process for student data privacy. I'm not going to click on this one to get logged into this, but I do want to click to the resource that we have right here, and this is accessible to anyone in the state to see. If we scroll down to the bottom, you can see that we have 262 digital resources vetted in Carson City School District that all comply with all of those federal and state laws. And so we know there are thousands, tens of thousands of resources out there. So anytime there's a new resource that comes out that teachers may want to use, this is the first process. And so, anyone is welcome to look at this website, because it simply is connected to our educator dashboard that is accessible to the public on our school district website. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. But let's go back to this common sense privacy evaluation. I'll go ahead and open this one up too. Common Sense is such a wonderful resource. It's totally a go-to for our anything digital citizenship. But what you can see on here, these first of all are in alphabetical order as our list is, but you can see some fail, some pass, some have warnings. So if you're looking for a particular resource, I just happened, as you can see on my screen, these were 3 resources that are vetted in our district and are approved. I'm going to go to Flipgrid here for just a minute, just to give you an idea of what actually Common Sense has. And once again, it is free. So when we click on the link, it's going to take you to all of these different areas. What information does it collect? What information does it share? How is it secure? What rights do I have to the data? Well, notice some of these scores. What data does it collect? It didn't get a very high score, only 35%. So there's lots of warnings here. But overall, because they may collect it, but if they don't share it out, that also is, a big contributor. So that's why it, one of the reasons why it got a passing score. How does it secure the data? Once again, it may not be as secure as it can be, but if it's not shared out, then that's how they have compiled all these scores. If you go down to the bottom, there is a very, very comprehensive standard privacy report, and we aren't going to go into any of these details, but you can see how much, I don't want to make you seasick on the screen here, but there's dozens of resources that Common Sense goes through. I'm just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So I want to make sure that everybody has this resource available to them through Common Sense, because this is a great place to start. And once again, I guess I can't repeat it enough. It is a free resource if you don't have access to something that is paid. So that is a little overview of these links on our slide deck. And then these are some questions just to think about, what are questions to ask when you're vetting a resource? What kind of some of the things that we just looked at on the Common Sense site there. How is it collected? How is it shared? How do they secure it? Is it sold? How safe is the resource? Is there advertisements? Are the advertisements tracked? Can the teacher provide parental consent, or how is that set up in your local district's acceptable use policy? Is the resource intended for school? Because there are some resources out there that some of our teachers find that seem to be great resources, but they're usually created with a different audience in mind. And so so then we need to know, what they're doing with the data when it possibly is a resource that has not been made for students. So there's just a group of questions that possibly keep in mind as you're thinking about resources that you may want to use. So I've mentioned several times about districts internet safety technology, acceptable responsible use policies. Some have even changed their name in districts to empowered, EUP, the empowered use policy. And so knowing where that local policy and regulation is, I believe in at least 2 of our other webinars in this series, I have referenced our acceptable responsible use policy here in our district, but please make sure that you do know where that is in your district. Monitoring and content filtering, as I had mentioned before, with making sure that schools have this. There's lots of different resources out there. We used to use one called iBoss. We've now switched to one called Cisco Umbrella. So anytime a student may be trying to research something, they they may get that block, and it's something that teachers need to be aware of. If they if it is a credible resource, please make sure that you work with your IT department, because sometimes they can be unblocked, sometimes they can't. But just knowing what that monitoring and filtering software is. Back to this cloud data storage, this kind of goes back to where is that PII being stored. In Carson City School District, we only allow our students and our staff, it's everyone, to use OneDrive from Microsoft and Google Drive. Third-party resources like Dropbox are not allowed because of some of the privacy concerns that we have had in the past with them. So make sure that you know what the approved cloud data storage resources are in your district. And once again, it comes down to really, being informed and knowing, to help your students as well to be better digital citizens. So there's a little bit more information about that acceptable responsible use policy. Some districts do, some districts do not have social media policies, because we have so much social media now. Guidelines and having a policy and regulation is really a good idea. 2 most important things is, 1, anyone that decides they're going to use an account for social media, get authorization, whether you're a classroom teacher from your principal, admin at your school, or someone at the district level, getting that approved from the district office level. And it's very important that a district email is used, so that if there's any reason that anything needed to be tracked, then it is not associated with a personal email. So those are a few guidelines. And then a few of the things that we just practice here in Carson City, but we think are really good guidelines is, keeping personal accounts private, not friending students, or, it's totally up to you about, if you want to friend the parents, but basically, most of our teachers here have said, once you graduate from high school, then maybe we can talk about that. But that just, there's kind of a line there that, they can friend the school account. And so that works really well. And that's what we, that's the second bullet there. And just keeping, kind of a clear delineation between what is school related and what is personal. So that, like I said, some districts have this, some don't. So you might want to check that out and see if you have a social media policy in your district. So now we're going to switch just a little bit to cybersecurity. That was kind of the wrap up of the student data privacy. So you can see on this slide, security is not complete without you. Unfortunately, a majority, like 90+% of any kind of cybersecurity issues are user error. And so not intentional usually, but just because, be aware of those malicious emails. Somebody tries to get you to think there's someone else. the coin term here, phishing, based on the word phishing with the letter F, luring you into clicking on something or disclosing information in an email or on a website, making sure that that you're aware of those. Opening attachments from unknown sources, that is a really important. If you get an email from someone that you're not sure about, definitely do not open any attachments, because that can send all sorts of red flags across the network. And then this one, I'm not sure how many people are aware of this. I think it's becoming a much more aware, and that's great, is unknown links that might be embedded in a website or an email. We're pretty much talking about email here, but hover over what that looks like and see if it is a valid email. It could say, lmorris@nvdlc@gmail.com, that should be the email that I'm sending it from. But if it said lmorris@ spam test, then you would know that that would not be something that you would click on. Somebody had hacked my account and was pretending to be me. And then the other really important thing is about our passwords. And this is such an important thing for our students as well, keeping our email passwords unique. Don't use the same password at school that you use for your banking at home. And, keep those silos separate so that, if an account is hacked, all of your accounts are not hacked. So that is a little information specifically about cybersecurity. I did want to give you some recent research as well. There is a new organization called K12 CIX. The CIX stands for Security Information Exchange. It's a new national nonprofit, as it says here, dedicated solely to helping to protect public and private K12 schools. And this is a brand new resource that just came out, as you can see at the bottom of this, on March 10th. So this is a hyperlink, and there's all sorts of great information. I'm going to show you a couple of things out of this in the next couple of slides. So I wanted you to see, some of the latest information that is out there. We'll talk about these cyber incidents in just a second, but here are two other agencies that are out there that are working hard to help keep us safe. So I just wanted you to know about those, and those are both hyperlinks. So if you look at this, the biggest part of this is this 45% is the denial of service. How are hackers, other people that have ill intent, are they denying service across a network? We talked a little bit about phishing, ransomware, data breach, and everything else that's out there. These incident types, I actually took this screenshot out of the previous slides resource. Whoops, I didn't mean to click on that. Out of this. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you can certainly go back to this. So I just wanted you to see kind of what was happening just in K12 last year. Well, I'm clicking on the wrong thing on my slide here. There we go. So this is also a screenshot. You can see K12 Cyber Incident Map. Since 2016, there have been almost 1,200 incidents where K12 institutions have been compromised in some way. And unfortunately, we do have a few here in Nevada. So, just being aware of where those cyber incidents occurred. Here's a couple of other resources as well, the EdTech Strategies, the Global Resilience Federation, and then I just wanted to give credit where credit is due, because this, like I said, this was a screenshot out of that resource that I had just talked about. And I'm clicking, I got too many windows open here. All right. Once again, in the news, cyber criminals are targeting students and teachers. And I do apologize. I see I'm 2 minutes over. I'm just about done. If you do need to sound off, I understand. I'll get through these last couple of slides. So really, we must take cybersecurity awareness education as a top priority. It is becoming more and more, especially with the pandemic and all of the distance learning that has occurred, and I do believe will continue to occur. Often learners and even teachers and parents don't understand how to protect the information, and so hopefully I have provided you with some resources this evening that will help you with that. And then back to, being a good digital citizen means understanding and practicing these safe, secure digital habits. So this is also a hyperlink to this resource or this information that was just released as well. And just 10 days ago, we have two U.S. House members, representatives from Rhode Island and from California, asking our new education secretary at the U.S. Department of Education, our new secretary Miguel Cardona, to please immediate guidance to the districts, clarifying how they can use some of the federal funding that's coming to help with some of the security products, so we don't have so many of those cybersecurity incidents. So this is definitely a very timely topic that we want to be sure that what we're hoping we're going to have some support from. And that's actually the letter that they wrote to Secretary Cardona. And then the last slide, I have just put some other resources. There is a great parent's guide to cybersecurity. The Student Privacy Pledge is another organization that's helping vendors understand the resources. And I have mentioned I Keep Safe in previous webinars as well. But this is a great little checklist and a quick guide. Once again, this is a hyperlink to, to have conversations, have parents have conversations with their children about, some of the things that we should be aware of. One of the biggest things for homes right now that are being hacked are security cameras. And so it's, that's something to be aware of. And so that wraps up the content of my presentation. I did want to make sure that I did a lot of research for this from a lot of different resources. I did a lot of research for the other webinars as well, but you can see that this list of resources is very comprehensive to pull all of that together. So these are great hyperlinks to take you to those specific resources. And as always, for our Nevada Department of Ed Digital Learning Collaborative webinars, just to make sure that everybody understands that this is a public service announcement, and it is provided for informational purposes only. It is not a statement of official state policy, nor should it be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. It is neither a legal interpretation nor a statement of state policy. And so, as with any of these things, please consult your IT department for approval before using any third-party platforms, tools, or resources. And that pretty much sums up our disclaimer here, disclosure for the webinars that our digital engineers are doing. And so now I would like to open it up to questions, if anybody has any questions. And like I said, I apologize, I'm over about 5 minutes. So you can either type your questions in the chat, or you can certainly unmute your mic and feel free to ask me any questions.
Leanne, that last slide with the list, that.
Yes.
One more. No, one more.
This
yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Have to be careful about plugins. I'm a dinosaur with technology. What exactly is that?
A lot of, well, it can be interpreted in a couple of different ways. First of all, any kind of a webcam that could be external, that could be considered a hardware plugin. In the world of Google Chrome, if your district is using a lot of, if most people are using Chrome as their browser, there could be add-ons, extensions. There's a lot of third-party resources like that, and that can kind of all be lumped into plugins.
Oh, okay, got it. They just put webcams on our computers at school, but I don't use the computer at school. I use the Chromebook.
Oh, okay. And
Okay.
you know, we would assume that, you know, anything that was being used from a hardware standpoint, that whatever you know, application was being installed to actually run that, you know, would be up to date as far as making sure that there wasn't anything wrong with the software associated with that. But that's why it just says be careful.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Wanting to give adequate wait time, I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to, you know, ask any questions.
Not a question, but just a comment. When you started off about the 260 vetted resources that are approved by, I'm going to just feel out my department. I'm in science, and there's 12 of us, and I never hear anybody asking another teacher, you know, is it bad? Is it good? I'm just curious. I'm going to put feelers out and see if they even know that this resource is out there for us.
Sure, that's a great idea. And I know in our district, that's the first level of vetting. You know, does it comply with the student data privacy laws? If it doesn't, then we don't even really look, well, we don't look at it from an instructional standpoint. You know, how does it align with the standards? What are the goals that, you know, the program or application are, you know, are trying to achieve or help the students with their learning? That's the second level, but it's really important that we know where the data is going. Being a Google Apps for Education district, now called Google Workspace, most of our applications, you know, the students and the teachers use the single sign-on. You know, if it says, can you log in with Google, the majority of, you know, the time that is what is used. And then what are those resources actually doing then, because they're tied to that Google.
Sorry, parrot.
Oh yes, I forgot about your parrot.
Yes, there he is.
There he is.
There, he's being bad. Well, he's looking at you. He's giving you the evil eye.
Uh-oh.
That's because you're taking attention away from him.
Yes.
Thank you, Leanne. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Any other questions? I don't, certainly you're not expected to stay on, you know, any longer than the time that we have allotted here, but I certainly want to honor your time and your questions if there is anything else.